Ladies, on March 27th at the Golden Gate Club in San Francisco, I invite you to join a room of trailblazers, executives, entrepreneurs, and visionaries who are rewriting the rules of money. Hear from real women who've built wealth through real estate investments, scaling businesses, and creative financial strategies. And learn from industry leaders who have walked the path you're on and who are ready to share their playbooks. You'll engage in intimate panels, fireside conversations, and curated peer-to-peer matchmaking designed to spark meaningful connections. Leave with our wealth creation toolkit packed with actionable resources to help you prioritize your goals and take immediate steps towards financial independence. Now, your journey doesn't end when the day is over. Each of you will be invited to join our online Catalyst community, where you'll be guided through more educational opportunities and times to be able to connect with each other over the course of the next few months. Wealth creation is about opportunity and community. The Women in Wealth Catalyst Summit, ladies. It's time to redefine wealth and redefine your future.
Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together. I am here today with a powerful investor, board director, and a woman who is no stranger to being the most powerful and sometimes only woman at the table. Keri Finley, thank you so much for being here today on Getting Rich Together. I'm just delighted for this conversation.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, Keri, let's jump in. And we're not going to jump in with all of the incredible things that you're up to today or starting off with the launch of your firm a few years ago. We're going to start off with the place that maybe most people don't, which is a young Keri. Keri, who is somewhere between 8 and 12 years old, who's navigating the world, who probably doesn't yet know of things like venture debt financing. What is she up to? What are the money stories like in her world, and what's happening?
So, I actually think that was probably the toughest age because there was a recession in Los Angeles, some call it a depression, in the early 90s. And that's where I grew up. And at the time I was going to public elementary school and figure skating was my passion. But, my mom, it's like one of these moments that sticks with you your whole life. My mom came home one day and she's like, I think we're going to lose the house. And I was like, wow, I mean, how's that possible? Like, my parents went to good colleges. My dad works all day, all night. He was a CPA and never stopped working. And she said, look, he's a partner at his firm. He's the youngest partner, and he doesn't get paid because people in the LA area, which were his clients, were not paying their bills because everyone was struggling, and they have to pay the salaries of the non-partnered employees first, and there just isn't enough left over. And house prices in LA were down probably somewhere between 30 and 50%. From the peaks of the kind of boom in the 80s. And that moment really struck with me. And it stuck with me that I never want to be in this position again. I never want to be in this position of instability. My dad would say now that it probably wasn't true. The house really wasn't underwater, that we would have been fine. But at that moment, as, call it somewhere in my late single digits of age, to hear that was just really jarring. I mean, I grew up the poorest kid in our neighborhood. The people we lived amongst had fancy cars and nice things. And we lived in one of the smaller houses in the neighborhood. And, getting things like new shoes, new jeans was always a fight. We drove the oldest cars. It was one of those type of things where, the area was a nice area, but we probably stretched to be there. And so it always sticks with you. And it always sticks with you of wait, are we going to be homeless? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to live? What's going to happen? And while those, kind of things were avoided, you just don't forget it. And so making enough money to not ever have that situation happen to me again was always at the forefront of my mind.
It's almost like something like that happens to you and you're young and confused, and all you know is you never want that to come true. And you
Yeah.
will do anything you can to ensure that never happens. And also it's one of those things when you're younger, you don't really know also how to control anything. So it's this feeling of out of control, right? Like things are happening. I don't know what to do about them, but I know that my life as I know it could possibly change drastically. And I understand. I think that that's it's a powerful place to come from as a young child. So as you were moving through high school, did any sort of those fears contribute to, let's say, getting a part-time job or starting to find ways of doubling down on academics? How did you leverage that early on fear as you started to make your way through young adulthood or through high school?
Yeah, so I was one of those kids who took 11 APs.
Oh my gosh, Keri.
And so I was not one of those kids who had a part-time job. I mean, things got better, right? Like, so the recession in LA cleared. LA was on a better trajectory. My dad's job, I just never heard about it again. It's not like they ever told me it got better, but his firm did fine to well. And from there, like, I don't think we ever had those worries. I always could try to judge our like family's financial situation by, how easy it was to like get $20 to go to the mall or get $50 to go to the mall with friends. That's how I really judged it. When I applied to college, I'll never forget, my aunt sat me down one day and said, I want to make sure you're not putting the burden of college on your father. And, my aunt and uncle were very wealthy and we were not. And, she said, as she always did, we can afford college for our kids, but just because our kids aren't taking out loans doesn't mean you don't have to. And it was always telling me, how much better they were than us. And we had a very complex family. And it was interesting, but I came home with the FAFSA forms and, said to my dad, hey, I'm going to need help filling these out. And he like took them and crumpled them and threw them away and said, you really think we qualify for this? And I just had no idea. And so I did always focus on academics. It was always doing the best I could, taking on the most I could. And, coupling that with a love and a passion for a sport, which was figure skating, was tough. And I made sacrifices in other places to be able to do both. But I do remember like those money moments as like very kind of, they really stick out and they stick with you. Of like, I thought we were poor. And then my dad tells me that we don't qualify for financial aid for college. It didn't make sense to me, but, I just kind of had to roll with it and go with it.
Wow. And so deciding on where to apply to school and ultimately going off to a very prestigious school, were there any sort of fears around paying for college, or how did you sort of navigate? And ultimately, how did you make the decision to go to Columbia, and how did that sort of unfold? It's definitely so interesting. I was talking to someone the other day about this idea of not qualifying for aid, but not necessarily having all the resources to sort of get ahead. Had your father siphoned any money away for school? How did you navigate college?
I didn't. I just hoped. I mean, I had no idea is the best way to put it. Money was not, our financial situation was always discussed as difficult. We had no idea what that meant. We had no idea what like that meant for us. And all we knew was that we had these rich aunts and uncles who would take us on family vacations, but treat us like second-tier citizens while we were there. It was a very weird life and weird upbringing relationship with money. Every time my dad wrote a check for college, I had no idea if that was the last one, if that was like, it just wasn't discussed. And, again, I went from thinking we were relatively without until the day I realized that we didn't qualify for financial aid, but we certainly, I knew paying for college was not easy. I chose Columbia because my mother told me that one plane schools had to be prioritized above 2 plane schools because of the cost. I lived in Los Angeles. They lived in Los Angeles. And so anywhere you could get on one aircraft had to be prioritized above schools that you could get to on 2 aircrafts. And that was how I chose Columbia. So of the good schools I got into, I believe Northwestern and Columbia were 1 plane schools, and Penn was a 1 plane school, but I didn't get in. And then the others were 2 plane schools. That's how I picked it.
Well, hot dog. So here you are in Columbia, and you are making your way through university. Obviously, university is this like new space with lots of new people, new identity, new opportunity to sort of show up and experience things and see things. Had you known at that time when you were going to Columbia that you would end up with this incredible career in finance, or where was your heart and spirit and mind with relationship to your studies and what it was you thought at the time you would do?
Oh, I just like couldn't find my next party quick enough. I like gave up so much socially to like figure skate and go to school and take 11 APs that like when I got to college, it was a little crazy. I stayed up too late. I partied too much. I drank too much. I would say I went a tad the wrong way. Freshman year, I was on academic probation. I got home. My dad took away my car. He said if this ever happened again, it would be permanent. And that was that. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was always really good at math. And when you're a little girl who's good at math, everybody says you're going to be a doctor. Then I fainted when we had to dissect the fetal pig in whatever science class that was. And then you're like, well, what is there for me if I'm good at math and I can't be a doctor? What's next? So I actually like always thought I'd be like an IP lawyer because I'm a tad argumentative and very straightforward. So people always, suggested that. I didn't really like think about it other than like, okay, I'm going to be an IP lawyer. And then when I was a junior, I told my dad I wanted to stay in New York for the summer. And he said, well, it's time to get a job. And I had worked in a lab in LA for a summer or 2. I can't really remember. But so I went to the Columbia Career Center and they had resume writing classes. And I ended up getting an internship on Fridays at Merrill Lynch, helping a financial advisor cold call, try and find new clients for himself. And so I would cold call people because Columbia didn't have class on Fridays. And so I did that to show financial services institutions, because that's who recruited at Columbia for the most part, that I cared about finance. I didn't know I cared about finance, but I applied to every job on the Columbia job board. And they had this like online career center portal. And I got a bunch of interviews, and the best job I got was at Morgan Stanley in the sales, trading, and research program. I had offers at Bank of America and Bear Stearns and potentially some other firms. But my dad said to me, Keri, I asked around, and my friends say if you go to Morgan Stanley, it will be a white shoe firm, and we'll put you at the top of the pecking order with other kids who are at white shoe firms. And that's how I chose it.
Wow. And obviously this first opportunity at Morgan Stanley, you're getting paid. You're starting to make your way into the world. Young Keri getting her first paychecks. Where is the money going, Keri?
Oh, I was so broke. So I lived in New York City. Rent was the first big one. And then it was my subway card, my heating, electric, I guess it was what it is, Wi-Fi and cable, which was very expensive, my cell phone. And I think after that, I had like $1,000 left over a month. And it was cabs because I would often get to work very, very early, like before 6. And the subway wasn't super safe before 6. And walking was, there were cold and a lot of homeless people and not a lot of people on the street, and it was dark. And so it went to cabs, and it went to like some Saturday night dinners with some friends.
And so on this journey, as you're now starting to really find your sector, starting to build your career, as you started to earn more and you started to get more involved in finance, how did your sort of education in finance coupled with your own understanding of personal finance, How did that start to unfold?
So it was very interesting because somehow and for some reason, I never viewed my bonuses as spendable money. I always viewed that goes to savings. And, I would say that like early on, I probably should have bought myself something and then put the rest away. I think I probably would have been a little bit happier, but I just couldn't view it that way. I was working so hard. I was working so many hours. There are two money stories that really played into that. One was I was at Bloomingdale's with a friend from high school, and I found these like really cool jeans that I really liked. And I looked at the price tag and I started calculating my hourly wage. And I was like making at that point probably $200,000 a year, really good income, especially for that age. I was a couple years out of school, but the amount of hours I was working were making the hourly wage terrible. And I was like, okay, do I want to spend, and I can't remember what it was, but like 10 hours at my desk extra to buy these jeans? And the answer was no, and I put them back.
Wow.
And that like really kind of was like, okay, I don't know if I like doing this job. I need to figure that out first, and I should keep saving. And then a couple years later, when I got like one of my first like sizable bonuses, I was with a friend and she's like, let's go shopping and buy ourselves bonus gifts. And she, I think, had just gotten promoted at JP Morgan. And I think I was at Third Point at the time. And we went to YSL. And the saleswoman at YSL showed, like, I'm looking at this bag and she goes, oh my God, this would be the best investment. And I looked at the bag and I said, nope, this is not an investment. This is a discretionary purchase. I should put my money in an investment. I don't need this. And I put it back. And so it was things like that that kind of shaped my personal financial decisions of like, I never want to be homeless. I remember that from like being a kid. I need to save this. This is not an investment. This is not a good use of my money. And so as my income grew, I didn't spend more. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with my boyfriend at the time for almost 9 years. I think it was 8 years. I mean, it was really crazy how long we stayed in that apartment because they only raised our rent $100 a year. I just didn't want to spend more. And like when I got my bonus at the end of the year, I invested it. I often invested it in a similar thing to what I invested in at work. I had a high degree of competence around it, of confidence around the investment. And they did really well. But it really had to do with not spending more than I needed to and building my savings and my nest egg.
That's incredible. And so as your investing confidence continued to grow, did you see yourself, or were you sort of primarily invested in public markets? Had you started dabbling or starting to look at venture funds or other ways of allocating your resources? How much did you keep pushing it, and when did you get the inkling to keep going?
So this is unfortunately very unattainable to most individual investors, but I ran a structured credit business at a hedge fund in New York called Third Point. I invested my personal money in structured credit securities. And it's very unattainable because they're hard to find. You have to source them. And, the only reason I was able to buy them and source them at the time, they were called odd lots, meaning small sized mortgage-backed securities. So an institution might buy a $5 or a $10 million block. A person can find a $250,000 block, smaller block, otherwise known as an odd lot, that you could buy. And so I first started doing that. Then I started actually buying closed-end funds, public securities at discounts that were managed by the likes of people like PIMCO and Western Asset Management, colloquially known as WAMCO, and places like DoubleLine and TCW. And they have, different arrays of closed-end funds. I started looking for closed-end funds that traded at discounts on the public exchanges that held a lot of mortgage-backed securities and structured credit securities, which I really knew.
Wow. So not only do you have a tremendous amount of aptitude and brilliance, but you're also getting a tremendous amount of access and this ability to really flex those muscles combined with
living in a one bedroom apartment in Manhattan and being able to really have the resources to play with and to be able to, it sounds like, take a great deal of joy around it. It sounds like it was pretty fun for you. Yeah.
But just for your listeners, the closed-end funds are things that they can look at and buy as well. As long as you have a Schwab account, a Fidelity account, there's this great guy named Boaz Weinstein right now who's been publishing a lot of work about closed-end funds. It's very interesting. It's something anyone could invest in as long as you have a Fidelity or a Schwab account or something similar.
Amazing. So I hope everyone's like scribbling notes ferociously. That's incredible, Keri. So, okay, life is progressing. You're making incredible strategic moves here with your resources. You stayed at Third Point for some time. Yes. And you were there really sort of at the foundation of growing this business. I believe you were there for nearly 10 years, right?
Yep. Just under 10 years. It was wild. When I started at Third Point, the business, Dan, who runs the firm, said to me, we're going to give you $100 million to invest and we're going to see how it goes. And if it goes well, we're going to give you another $100 million to invest and then we'll see from there. And, kind of by the biggest my book was just south of $4 billion. So my business grew considerably. My profits grew considerably. I made the firm billions of dollars, made investors billions of dollars, had a mid-20s unlevered IRR, which is like relatively crazy. And I was like, a lot of it was luck. Some of it was skill. I'm incredibly proud of the results and the returns I produced there. And it's one of those things that nobody can take from you, which is pretty cool.
It's so amazing. Okay, so you're growing this incredible business. You are on fire. Obviously, money is something that also touches home. So you and your partner at the time, obviously, there are lots of resources that you can invest and do things with. How did you approach conversations at home around money? Was your partner also sort of similarly in finance? Like how did these conversations take place? And obviously, Keri, you're just super blazing fire here as a high earner in the relationship. Was it balanced match? How did these conversations go?
I mean, when we were really young, we were in college and we went to college together. He was, without question, one of the smartest people at Columbia. He was triple majoring in, I think it was like math, philosophy, and I think he maybe had a third, maybe it was a minor, whatever. He was expected to go on and really shape the world of finance. And he never really found his footing. Things never really went that well. He switched jobs very often, but we were both conservative investors. One thing that I regret around the relationship was that we always put his career first. And I think we always put his career first because when we met and we were, I don't remember how old we were, but somewhere like 19, 20, the expectation was that he was going to be incredibly successful. He was a programmer. He had won some e-trading investment challenge. He was programming for a hedge fund at Deutsche Bank in addition to working at school. They had offered him a full-time job. He got an offer at D.E. Shaw, D.E. Shaw was like the job everybody wanted. I didn't want it because I felt like I had very little financial services experience and needed a training program. But for someone who had knowledge and had ability, I mean, it was perfect for him. It was like the prize job at Columbia. And I think he was the only one that got it. We both were not big spenders. Neither of us really liked stuff. We didn't, clothes were not interesting to me. Jewelry was not interesting to me, and nor was it him. From that perspective, it actually worked really well. It wasn't until we were probably in our mid to late 20s that our earnings shifted. And it went from him out earning me to me out earning him. And I would say that it was something we just never talked about. And, I think the outside world looking at us, he ran the swaps desk at Deutsche Bank and Morgan Stanley and Credit Suisse, I believe. And I was at a hedge fund. I don't think from the outside anyone really knew who was making money in the relationship and who wasn't. And it was just not something that was discussed.
Interesting. And so as you were thinking of your departure, talk to me a little bit about the dominoes that then fell as you then looked to launch Tacora. So obviously you're at Third Point for just shy of 10 years. You're building this incredible book of business, striking out on your own. You've got a lot of evidence here that proves to you just being extremely capable and successful of doing something on your own. What was the thought process? How did you start to think about this? And what ultimately led to your decision?
Well, so it actually was a personal decision. In 2015, my partner could not get a job in New York. He looked for a job for a long time. He had gotten let go from the job he had. And he kind of came to me after, a couple months of looking for a job and said, the options are London, Chicago, or San Francisco. And we talked about the jobs. We talked about the firms, the jobs. And I think he was leaning towards the one in San Francisco. But I said, Third Point has an office in Menlo Park. I'm confident they'll let me work out of there. And so I should be able to make that work. I said, look, in a year, we'll discuss. We'll see how it's going. And if you really like your job and it's a better opportunity than I have, I'm willing to quit and move to San Francisco. And, commuting really broke me down. I would say that I wasn't having a great year performance-wise at work. And I was on a plane every week heading back and forth to San Francisco, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And so after about a year and a half, maybe closer to 2 years, somewhere in that range of commuting, I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I retired and I moved to California.
Wow. And what was that like for you navigating sort of the different ways in which California is? It's a different beast, isn't it? And there are lots of different energies, and the way that things operate are different. How was that experience for you?
It was actually really shocking. So in New York, my experience was the number of times I heard someone say, if I can just hang on to my job for 5 more years, if I can just resist the change for 5 more years, if I can just make it 5 more years as the market shift around me, I'll be good. And it really felt like this, grasping onto the past. And then you go to San Francisco and all you hear is, I want to change the world. And I joke that the number of times somebody says in a meeting, I want to change the world, is a high correlator to the amount of fraud that is going on in the organization, because people do use it as a substitute for real words and real action. But behind and at the heart of wanting to change the world is wanting to help move society forward. And you really do have these incredible people, venture capitalists, founders, all throughout the chain who want to move society forward. And they want to do it related to financial services. They want to do it related to healthcare. They want to do it related to insurance. And I found it really inspiring. And so finding, in New York, it's easier because people are so substance oriented. It's easier to figure out who the bullshitters are. In San Francisco, it's much harder because you have these great, amazing people. And there's this guy named Joe Lonsdale who I'm honored to call a friend. And he every day wakes up and thinks about the VC he's building, the companies he's funding, and how they are going to change society and make it better. He started a university. He started a school for his children that has other kids as well. The amount of things he's starting. And I always once in a while I'll say to myself, I want to be him when I grow up. He is working on so many incredible, cool things. He knows so many interesting people. I mean, you go to his house on a Saturday for lunch and you don't know who else is going to be there. It could be one of the people who works for him who are all wonderful and intelligent. Or it could be someone who started an amazing business that sold it. Or it could be somebody who's in government somewhere. He's just so multifaceted. And I'm so enamored and look up to him because of the way he's built his network and changed the world. But for every Joe who really is trying to change things, there's someone who uses the same phrases as a red herring to get you looking over there so you don't see what they're doing. And finding which ones are which is actually, for me, it was a very challenging exercise. And I think I figured it out over time. And we used to call them the dodos. But it's very hard to figure out who is who.
Wow. You said something that I think is worth highlighting here, which is you retired to California. Now, my darling, you are young. So to say that you retired out in California is, if not nothing, to be able to say that you gave yourself an opportunity to try something new, to figure things out, to give yourself a new experience. This would have been for the first time, I believe, where you didn't have a thing you had to do, given that you were retired. So how did you emotionally and intellectually navigate being young, being retired, and having this breadth of opportunity for you to ... change the world if you should choose? How did you manage all that? What was going through your mind? How did you feel?
Not great. Waking up every day and like going to Soul Cycle, like, which I thought I would love, was not something that like I really was able to manage super well without having some focus and some other things that were like engaging me to do. I mean, on the other side, like my friend Joe, who I mentioned, put me on a couple boards. This other guy who runs a fintech practice at Andreessen Horowitz put me on a board. I was helping a bunch of different companies and helping some VCs. And I, within like 3 weeks, realized like retirement was not for me.
So at this moment of saying, I've got to go do something, I need to figure out what's next. How did you start to put together the pieces of what this would look like?
It took a while. So 6 months, say 7 months after I left Third Point, an article came out that said I was under SEC investigation. I don't believe that reporting is accurate, but that put a pin in some things. That article made certain people that I was engaged with and thinking about next steps not want to do business with you. It was actually a really challenging time. I was like that. It made me incredibly depressed. I'll never forget this young woman that I had mentored at that point for probably 7-8 years. Sends me this text message that says like, hey, Keri, kind of goes without saying, I work at Goldman Sachs and they don't want me to engage with you. Wish you the best of luck. And, you always know when you leave a really successful run that there were always a bunch of people there and around you for the ride. There to try to sell you things, there to try to make money off of you. I knew it. I would say that I guessed with almost 100% accuracy incorrectly as to who it would be. The young women that, I helped her get her job at Goldman Sachs, like she was working at another firm. And I, when Goldman was looking for someone, I'm the one that suggested her. I'm the one that said I would have her be my sales coverage, start her career there on the right foot. I really did a lot for her. And I would say that at least it was a stab in the front, not in the back, but it was incredibly hurtful. And so it was a really hard time. After that article came out, the number of people that like exit stage left in your life just go up. Even, the people, people are going to not want to stay in touch with you because you no longer can make them money. They no longer can sell you anything. But then this was like a much deeper cut. You kind of find out who your friends are and who they're not. And like, they don't, it took me a lot of time to get there, but like, they don't have my ethics. I won't have them around me. And I, will tell you, as like we launched Tacora, we stay away from people who don't have our ethics. We try very hard at that. Doesn't always work, but we do our best. And so I was in a really dark place. And then 6 months after that, I found out that my partner of 15 years was cheating on me. And so it really was a very dark time. It was really rough. Then you have to figure out what you're going to do. And, he knew that his actions and keeping me from being able to invest money and all that kind of things made it so I really couldn't start a firm and start a fund. And that got very complicated because, he had access to all the funds. I didn't. It took years to unravel that. It took me a lot longer to launch Tacora than it should have under normal circumstances.
And talk about a dark night of the soul experience.
Oh, for sure. And what my best advice to people is that, like, it is unbelievable how many people like to grave dance, how many people like to see someone fall. I was a partner at Third Point when I left, and I was promoted to partner, I think, a year and change before I left. And the number of people that congratulated me on making partner versus the number of people that called me when that article came out to see how I was doing, or called me when my ex and I split to see how I was doing, it was a fraction of. But they are more than happy to talk about you behind your back. And people have forwarded me text messages with people's opinions about my separation from my ex, with people's opinions about the article. I mean, I find it really wild. I love to know. I was telling someone yesterday, an ex-employee from Third Point had said some bad things about me, and the person I had never met in my entire life. And it just is amazing how people love to dance on you when they think you're not going to recover. And most people don't. And, I would say for anyone who's going through a tough time career-wise, who feels like they're being grave danced on, my favorite podcast about this is this guy named Palmer Luckey. And he was on the All In podcast, and he confronted one of his grave dancers. And I have so much respect for him and so much thankfulness for him that he was willing to do that, because it hopefully will make the next person think twice.
And it often makes you wonder, don't people have anything better else to do with their time?
It was actually very interesting, because I was talking about this ex-Third Point employee who I had never met, who had said not some nice things about me. And it's like, being a woman in finance is hard. It's challenging. You're held to a second set of standards. You don't have to just be a good investor. You also have to, conform to the standards that other people want of you. And standards that probably aren't super well defined, because there just aren't that many women in these roles. And so, I look at her and I'm like, you're a really sad person. And I feel bad for you. I feel like you probably are bored. You probably are really unhappy, but I'm going to succeed in spite of you. And
totally. And here you are.
Yeah. And when I do, I'm, it's the motivation. It's the driver. It's to do it on your own, to show these people they're wrong, and to prove that you're going to do it in spite of them, without them, and without needing them.
Heck yeah, Keri. Well, you've got a fan over here who's let's crush it. So obviously with Tacora, this is a new opportunity, something where you get to breathe life into, you get to own it, you get to really direct where the ship is going. Talk to me a little bit about what it's been like now to be on your own and to be able to really steer this magnificent ship in the ways you want. And then also the support that you've now been able to receive. Because what I think is so incredible is when we go through the dark night of the soul, when things shut down and people go away, it really just clears the path and the channels for the right people to show up, the right partners, the right evangelists. So talk to me about the formation of Tacora these days and how it's going, and what is the legacy and what is the impact that you're looking to make with this?
I never wanted my own firm. That was never a goal. I always wanted to kind of bolt my strategy onto something bigger. And just so that it would relieve me of having to do operations, finance, accounting, treasury, and running that stuff. I dislike that aspect of the business that I thought I would hate so much, a lot less than I thought I would. So that's much better. But, we are a firm that, we do what we tell our investors we're going to do. We do asset-based lending to mostly venture-backed businesses. Everybody on the team is ethically aligned. I just believe these days that people who do bad things don't do them once. And so, somebody who treats me poorly is probably going to treat you poorly. Somebody who cheats on their spouse is going to try to cheat me in business. None of these things are isolated. And so we're trying to find good people with good values, and something so simple like jury duty. You can find out a lot about someone's ethics by asking about their jury duty experiences. And I probably just gave away my secret. But if you ask someone, I kind of look at the world as I want to live my life where if everybody did the same actions as me, the world would function well. So the simplest way of that is when everyone's getting off the freeway and there's a really large line. The people who cut and get off the freeway, at the end, right at the exit when there's 100 cars behind them, if everybody did that, the world wouldn't function. And those people would probably cheat you in business too. And so we look for people to weed out people who, try to get out of jury duty, who try to get out of civic responsibilities, who don't treat people well. We really just want to be in a world where, and it sounds too idyllic, but it's not, no one at my firm I would call nice, but I would call them all very kind, very straightforward, very honest. And that is the most important thing to me. If I ever found someone on the team not telling me the truth, like, we just wouldn't be working together. And like, I'm not looking for it, right? You can't be looking for times where people are like doing things, but like, you see it. They tell you who they are. You just have to let them.
Wow. And so with this new business and where it's going, and obviously now also navigating your own life in a brand new way, how are you looking at your personal finances today? Is it still through the same lens as that young 20-year-old who's, okay, this is how I'm going to spend my money and it's all being invested? Are you spending your money in different ways, investing it differently? How has your personal thesis changed during these last few years?
I have buckets of my money that are for like speculative investing. I'm probably invested in something like 30 or 40 different funds. When I worked at Third Point, people who worked there weren't allowed to invest in ex-employee funds. And so I made it my one of my goals to, when someone who was a friend of mine from Third Point left, I always invested in their funds. So there's a handful of those if they were starting their own. There's a handful of those just so that they could say, one of the partners who left Third Point, trusted me and backed me enough to be able and backed me in my new firm. So I did that. I think I still have a handful of those outstanding. I'm in a bunch of my friends' venture funds. I'm in a bunch of my friends' credit funds because I do credit. I have a lot of friends who started credit funds. So I'm in a bunch of those as well. And then I have the less speculative, kind of pool of capital, which is in public securities. I still have a lot of closed-end funds. I have a lot of REIT preferred stocks, which are senior to the common stock, but subordinate to the debt in my portfolio. And so I have, the amount of my money that's for treasuries and things like that just throw off income, the part of my money that's in like more public, more speculative securities, and then the fund investing as well. So I do take a little more risk than I used to. I mean, I guess I always took a lot of risk in my personal portfolio, but it was really high conviction then. Now it's coming out of the financial crisis, the opportunities were abound. And so I had really high conviction in some very speculative securities. But now I have, medium conviction, at least in everything I do. And I kind of put things into three buckets: is either safe, medium risk, or the funds I'm in are relatively high risk.
Fabulous.
And then obviously I invest in my own fund alongside our investors, because it's important to me that I'm aligned and important to them that I do so.
And outside of the investing, obviously there are also lots of fun ways we can also use our money outside of looking at ways of saving and sort of building wealth. Are there any pockets or areas or things that you have now grown or have been enjoying spending your money on, Keri?
I mean, I like causes that are important to me. Do I spend? I mean, I have this amazing ski house that it's probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever bought, but it brings me a lot of joy and I love it here. I didn't need a ski house. Like the other thing is like, it's all for, at this point, when I spend money on, again, I still don't like stuff that never really changed. But it's for convenience. It's the last minute airplane ticket. It's a nicer hotel than I would have. It's flying first class. It's all things that make life easier. A housekeeper, it's someone to, maybe cook sometimes, things like that. Things that make my life simpler, easier, and allows me more time to do the things I want to do, which is like see friends, help build community, things like that.
I think that's so beautiful. The ability to feel free, or the ability to feel like you have option, I think is so incredible, to add little bits of value to your day to day and make things smoother and easier. If there were a few words that you would use to describe what money means to you today, what would it be?
It's a means to make life easier. That's really what it is. It is freedom and optionality and to do what you want. I love what I do. I love investing. I don't think I realized how much I loved it until I retired. It gives me the freedom to, run the business and have the people I want around me who we pay everybody relatively well. And so far haven't taken much out of the firm at all. So it's a making sure that we have the right people, the right team. It's things like that, had I not had the success I did, I wouldn't be able to do as easily.
Incredible. My last question for you, Keri, is, our audience is always looking for ways to support, uplift, amplify, contribute toward the guests on the show. And so my ask for you is there anything that you are calling in right now in life, in business? Do you have any asks for the audience?
Not really, just support. I'd love people to help bring brand awareness to Tacora. That's my main goal. I mean, right now, we're a small firm. We're starting out just like anybody who's starting a small business. And we need to get brand awareness out there. And I want to get brand awareness out there. It's not easy. Every day it doesn't feel great, but I'm confident we're on the right path. And anybody who can help with that journey, with brand awareness, with sending customers our way for people to lend money to, small businesses who have interesting assets, send great employees our way and help bring awareness to what we're doing.
You got it. Keri, thank you so much for your generosity of time and spirit today. You are lovely and brilliant, and I'm grateful for your story. Thank you. Getting Rich Together is better today because of having you on the show. So thank you for all that you're doing in the world.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.